Hi everyone, welcome to ID Creatures. In this video we're going to talk a little bit about reflective objects and how to render them. So basically, before you learn how to render more complex shiny things such as cars or products or things like that, you have to learn the theory behind reflections, and the best way to do that is to learn how primitives such as cubes and cylinders reflect the environment around them. So basically what a shiny object is doing is reflecting its environment, the environment that it's in, off the surface of the object and into your eyes. So basically what you will see on the object's surface, depending on how reflective it is the environment reflected back at you. So in these cases we've got really shiny objects, so it pretty much reflects the environment perfectly. But in different levels of shininess, such as a car compared to maybe a layer of paint, will reflect differently. But in this case we're just going to deal with the shiniest kind of reflections just to keep it simple. So like I said before, the environment reflects into your eyes. So when you're drawing products and things that don't really exist yet, you can either imagine them in an environment that would be appropriate for the object, so maybe a kitchen for a knife or something. But in this case, we're going to keep it simple by keeping the objects in a generic environment. Now you can see that I've shown the environment here as just a ground plane and a sky plane and maybe a sun as a light source, but maybe not even that. So basically in a reflective object that you're rendering in this nondescript environment, you will always have the horizon and the sky, which is why sometimes it's called the horizon sky method, or that's what I'm going to call it. So to render a shiny object, basically if it's a cylinder like this, you just render a horizon, a ground plane, and a sky plane, because that's the environment and that's how it's reflecting back at your eye. So you have to take into account the fact that it's a round object, so it will elongate the environment lengthwise into your eyes, so it won't be just flat like a cube. It'll elongate the environment because you know how a round object reflects. So you can see the difference between the cylinder and the cube and how they reflect. And you can see that the cube reflects a lot more just normally, rather than this being more stretched out like that. So that's basically it. You have your environment, you have your object, and you just, in your mind's eye, you think about how the environment will reflect off the object into your eyes. So based on where the light source is, this horizon will change. If it was higher up, it might be up here. If the light source was lower down, maybe it's here. So just keep that in mind when you render a shiny object. Remember the environment. If it's just a generic environment, you can always count on there being a horizon and a sky. And it's really not that hard. So right now I'm going to show you how to render this object, this cylinder, in that environment. So here's a cylinder that I've already drawn out, ready to render. So I'm going to start with a warm gray 1 to start with the lightest tone. So I'm going to, first of all, already establish the horizon. So let's say the horizon's there. And then I'm going to fill in everything below that line, because that part is going to be the ground. It's going to be darker than the sky. And just to keep things simple for now, I'm going to say that this surface is not reflective, and just keep that gray without any complications. Now, for the sky, I'm going to start not at the edge, but a little bit off the edge, so that there's a little bit of backlighting. So I've done the warm gray one up to here. I left a white band just to give that the highlight that it needs. So now I'm going to move on to a warm gray 3. So what you really need to remember when drawing reflective objects is to blend the tones well. So I'm taking a warm gray 1 and blending it back into the 3. You can already see it's starting to look a little bit reflective. Now I'm going to darken that with a little bit more warm gray 3. So the two things you need to remember in drawing reflective objects is basically blending and contrast. You have to keep the contrast high between the darkest parts and the lightest parts, but you have to blend the parts well. So there's a mistake right there, so just ignore that. So I'm going to add a little bit of dark to the sky. Blend it. Now I'm going to take my darkest tone, the warm gray 7, and do that. And again, blend it. So this side probably needs to be a bit darker because it's in the shadow. So basically there's our reflective cylinder. Reflecting the environment, you can see the ground and the sky and the horizon separating them, and it looks pretty shiny. So it's really not that hard to render it realistically, but usually when you are drawing fast and sketching, you probably don't have enough time to do this. So let's talk about some quick ways to denote reflections. So I have a similar cylinder that I'm drawing just in a sketch. How would I make it look reflective without having to do all that? Well, basically you just simplify what you see here onto here. So if I was just sketching, I would just do this. So I've got my dark tone here, highlight, and sky. There. There's my quick shiny cylinder. You can even block out the highlight with some lines if you want. Maybe even shade in this part. but really you can just quickly show that it's a reflective object. So maybe with a cube, would be even easier. You can just do that. Just 2 quick lines can show that it's a reflective object. So after we've gone through that, it's pretty easy to render reflective primitives, and knowing how to render reflective primitives is how you get to understand more complex reflections. So you should practice drawing these cylinders, cubes, and maybe cones as well, and put them in an imaginary environment and have them reflect back at you. And even if you do them simply like this, or even just like this with one color of marker, it's all good practice on how to draw reflective objects. Thanks for watching, and I hope you subscribe to our RSS feed on ID Creatures to get regular updates, and I'll see you next time.